All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you to everyone for joining tonight for this webinar. My name is Eric Etherton. I'm the Assistant Principal for Student Services at Glenbrook North High School, and we're excited to welcome all of the District 225 families to this webinar. We're excited that you joined us, took the time on a very nice summer evening to spend time with us. Special thanks to my GBN and GBS colleagues for working on partnering together and providing this webinar. In addition, we have CHECKL, a parent organization out of Northbrook, who's done some great work bringing a lot of different topics to our communities on various items that have been heavy interest to our parents. In addition, we have Youth Services, Family Service Center, and Compass joining us tonight on this webinar, and I'd just like to thank all the participants for working so collaboratively together. And we've always been fortunate within our district that we have very collaborative relationships with all of our mental health agencies in the area, and have worked very, very well together. And we thank you for your ongoing partnerships. Special thanks to Jen Rudy, who's a GBN staff member who's doing the behind the scenes work technology wise for the webinar. And we're gonna start with some opening remarks. So the topic tonight is coping with COVID, strategies for summer. This is the first part of a 3-part series that we're gonna be providing through the summer months to our communities. And the reason why we chose this as webinar number 1 really is based on all the questions that we've been receiving the last 2 months from our parents and students. We've had a lot of calls and emails from families just asking how do we deal with everything that we're experiencing. If we look at COVID-19, a lot of fears about what that is, and contamination and spread of germs, and will we be okay? Will our family members and friends be okay? What does the future hold? When will things be safer for all of us? Being emotionally flooded trying to handle this topic, and then when we add on other topics such as the protests that we're experiencing, as well as families that have lost their jobs, their incomes, fears for the future, and to mention that we've been off of school physically, not in the buildings, for the last 2.5 months, and recognizing that students have lost a lot of activities that they're used to participating in, end of the year activities, seeing their friends, and then summer, a lot of activities being canceled for summer. And what does that mean for the future? So that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is strategies for summer, and then webinars number 2 and 3, the return to school and moving forward with meetings. So we're hoping that we can provide some information to everyone that's participating tonight that will be useful, and just recognizing that with everything going on in our lives, regardless of what the situation is, at various points in the future and in the past, we have struggled a lot as an individual or as a family and as a community, and we're here to support each other. And I think that's one of the best things we can remember in the Glimmer high schools, that we always really try to accept all, respect all, and really welcome everybody into our school communities, and to help them feel medically, physically, and emotionally safe. And once they feel safe, learning can really occur. So thank you again. Posted right now on this next slide is the objectives, but it's really meant to help discuss how to have a happy summer, given some of the stressors that we have, some parenting suggestions, how to communicate effectively with teenagers, some ideas for summer activities, and how do we come together as a community. So I'm going to turn it over to Kutch to continue with the introduction of the panelists, and we hope you enjoy this evening. And at the end, we will have some Q&A, so please feel free to submit questions towards the end of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Unmuted. Hi. Our mission at CATCH is to empower families to raise resilient and independent youth by focusing on mental health and emotional wellness. We focus on parent education and support, and this past year we put on 8 programs, plus we've done a few webinars in response to the pandemic. We are thrilled to be partnering with both Glenbrook North and Glenbrook South, and we are looking forward to future collaborations. Our presenters for tonight are Brian Simon from Compass Health Center, who happens to be a GBN alum, Lizzie Appleby from Youth Services of Glenview, Northbrook, Eric Etherton from Glenbrook North, Assistant Principal, Christina Seaborg, Glenbrook North Social Worker, Laura Cummings, Glenbrook South Assistant Principal, and David Hartman, Glenbrook South Social Worker. And now I'm going to turn it over to, I think, David.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who has taken time out of their evenings to join us. This is a fun opportunity to collaborate with our fellow schools and community partners. So, you know, practical parenting tips. Some of this is maybe self-explanatory and maybe some of it isn't, but it's a strange time without the same level of structure. So parenting is a little different, and we want to kind of focus on that. I'm going to focus on the talk today in these three areas: some structure, how to kind of provide the structure to the day and to the week so that we decrease anxiety for all of us, to be honest with you. Expectations, which I sort of stole from Brian, the limits are love, because they really are. The more we can provide those limits, the better off everybody is, and expectations remain the same. And then self-care, how do we focus on taking care of ourselves and everybody else? And for me, one of the things that's primary is how do you focus on today? It's easy, I think, to get away from how do I take care of myself because this unknown is happening and this chaos is happening. So we're going to focus on those three areas. Thanks, Jen. So self-care, and I put this one first on purpose because I think it's really critical to recognize that in terms of parenting, we really have to figure out how to take care of ourselves too. There's this sort of the age-old saying to put your own mask on first in a crisis, and that's sort of true here. I'm encouraging parents to really focus on yourself, figure out what you need to do to take care of yourself and do those things. Those are going to be all for different for all of you, but really take the time that you need to do you. The more you can do that, the more you can be there for your families and for your community. Focusing on the here and now, again, I talked about how critical that is. There's this strange future out there, and we can think about the past, all those things we didn't get. And those are sort of natural phenomena, but the more we help ourselves really come back to this moment is going to be really critical. I use this acronym SEEDS when I talk to kids and families, and I'm just going to real quick. SEEDS is socialization, education, exercise, diet, and self-care. And if you think about what you're doing for your own self-care in those sort of domains, I think you're gonna find yourself really taking care of yourself to the best of your abilities. And after you've taken care of yourself, so, oh yeah, forgot, sorry. So one of the reasons we're doing this is because social distancing is so strange. Many of those things that we've come to rely on in terms of taking care of ourselves are now much more difficult to do, like hanging out with your best friend or seeing friends or different things. And so we have some ideas here for how to really pay attention in this era of social distancing to take care. Taking breaks, getting outside, having conversations. Brian's going to talk more about sort of taking care of yourself, and Lizzie's going to talk about communication, but they're really important. Finding ways to be productive with goals or with hobbies, or tasks in the house. So I think all of these things are really important and important to think about during social distancing. In light of all that, Jen, can you go to the next? Thank you. In light of that, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to sort of manage technology. I think a lot of times in our families, we're recognizing that our kids, since they can't do as much socially, are potentially spending more time on social media and on their technology. And while we want to create limits, and we'll talk about that in a second, there are really some good apps out there and some good websites out there that are free that do a lot to sort of help with our self-care. 10% Happier and Headspace are two that I've actually used. They help with staying in the moment, mindfulness exercises. They guide you through meditation exercise. So recognize that even though we want to sort of pay attention to how much we use technology, that there's actually a lot of good stuff out there on technology. And these are just a few examples of that. So structure, this is, I think, a real key when you're thinking about parenting in the time of this pandemic with COVID, because structure, the way we knew it in terms of school and activities, is gone. And summer activities, camps, those things, it's just going to be different now. But we can still find different ways to put in structure into our days. And I've listed some of these things that I really feel like will help families and help you guys as parents. Bedtime and wake time. No sense to have our kids wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, right? We don't have to do that. We're not in school. But potentially having an expected wake time will help us have a reasonable bedtime. The more we can stay on that schedule, the more opportunity for family time, and the more sort of normalcy, quote unquote, which is a strange word, that will be there. I even recommend sometimes do Monday through Friday with a certain structure, and then the weekends you might be able to relax that a little bit, just like typical teenagers need. Reliance on routines is really critical. Family dinner night, people deciding on who's gonna cook might be a neat way to share things. You'll have your own routines in your family, but really rely on those things. Sunday might be a game night, different things. Those are really critical. And then how do we help our kids with activities during the day? And I just put some of these out there. Summer school potentially is an option, a job. Chores might be new in your house. Maybe there's an expectation that we share more in the chores because we're all home more. And then trying to find hobbies, both old hobbies that have worked for us in the past, but new hobbies, really critical. The screen time thing is a tough one, and you're gonna have to decide in your own family what makes a lot of sense, but have some conversations with your kids about how to manage that in a really healthy way, how to potentially earn that with some, I'm gonna talk about expectations in a second, but how to earn some screen time based on doing chores or staying on the wake time really consistently and well. There are lots of different ways. Be talking to your kids about what they're doing on their screens, just to make sure that they're not getting lost in the technology and forgetting to have some of the social interactions, both with their own family and with their friends. And then this new rituals. I've talked a lot about family to kids and families in the last couple of weeks, how our normal rituals and our normal routines sometimes lose their meaning. And so looking for new rituals. I was talking to a kid the other day who has started baking with one of his sisters. Neither one of them know how to bake, and they're having so much fun together because they're coming together in this new activity. Painting, different things, but trying to find new hobbies and new rituals, both for ourselves and for our families, will provide some structure and some meaning and some productivity to the day that I think you'll find is really quite beneficial. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is expectations, which I think potentially is one of the hardest ones. At the top there is teenagers and boundaries. Adolescence, for those of you who have teenagers, adolescence is really a time when kids' job is to push back against our expectations and our boundaries. And that's really healthy. They're trying to figure out who they are and what's appropriate for them and who they're becoming as young men and women. So having some boundaries and some consistency, this thing, limits are love or boundaries are beautiful, really helps with how we communicate with our kids about what the expectations are. And if we're having conversations about those expectations, then our kids are going to be more likely to push up against boundaries in really healthier rather than unhealthier ways. In terms of those boundaries, being clear and consistent. Again, I think it's Lizzie's going to talk about communication. Having some of these conversations with your kids, I think, in a new era will be really an interesting thing for you and potentially really revealing and empowering. So be consistent, be clear with those boundaries. Remember that consequences, I kind of like to think not necessarily about punishment and reward, but positive consequences and negative consequences. If you're having the conversations about your expectations, then the consequences are just a result of the breaking of those boundaries and things. And kids earn things, kids lose things by pushing up against boundaries in a different way and managing their own behaviors. You can, again, Lizzie, I sort of hope I'm not stepping on your parade too much, but having a conversation like, if this happens, then this happens, or if you, then this will. Those are really positive and powerful ways to begin to think about how to have productive conversations so that it's not just sort of this sometimes negative conversation that we get in when kids break the rules. So it might be really helpful. And then just as a reminder, privileges are earned, and I think reminding all of us that that's the case. I think sometimes our kids, cell phones, technology, cars, all those things get to be sort of things that we automatically have, and potentially being able to use the car is a privilege, potentially screen time is a privilege, all those things. And thinking about it that way is really pretty healthy, to be honest with you, because it helps with the expectations between the two of you. So pretty quick, I hope I didn't talk too fast, but those three, if you think about those three things, self-care, consistency, expectations, I think you'll be good to go. I think I'm turning it over to Brian now, right, Brian?
Yes, sir. Thanks, David.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, as we kind of put this night together, really looked at how can we be helpful? How can we come together as a community? And in response to COVID, one of the topics that came up was the anxiety and the uncertainty that comes along. And sure enough, over the weekend, more difficult times have kind of dawned on us that also can trigger some anxiety and uncertainty. And this is just another example of how the world around us may change. We can come together as a community for support, unification, education, and there's just kind of so much that's out there that's out of our control and difficult to sit with. So really our hope is to kind of continue to provide some validation, some ideas, some strategies for parents to work through these times successfully with their families. This is a pretty lofty goal for us to be talking about anxiety, uncertainty, and what I guess I consider a pretty short period of time. So part of the conversation is probably gonna be pretty provocative. And that is what anxiety is. It can be, it can be pretty tricky. So, as we're kind of talking through some of these things, I really hope that you kind of can gain some awareness and have some takeaways here. As we're talking about anxiety, these are fears and worries about the future. It's the unknown. And these are things that happen all throughout the day. We're all pretty familiar with it. We all have anxiety in some way, shape, or form. Anxiety can be helpful at times. I'm sure you can think back on times when maybe you had a presentation to give, or you took a test, or you had to meet with a coworker. A certain level of anxiety can help us to perform. It can help us prepare for something. It can help us to kind of think through things. And obviously there are times when it's not so helpful. One concept that I want to talk about today is how anxiety can grow when we feed it. And so when we engage in things like avoidance, reassurance, and distractions, it can actually make anxiety worse or perpetuate anxiety even more moving forward. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Uncertainty, the only certainty in life is the uncertainty of life. And I kind of put that quote in there because that's true. And sometimes it's nice for us to kind of be reminded of that, is that, uncertainty is not knowing outcomes. And there are so many things that we experience on a regular basis day to day where we don't know what the outcome is. And a lot of us, it's very difficult, especially for adolescents, it's very difficult to be able to sit with that, to kind of hold that and be able to feel okay and to continue moving forward with that uncertainty of not knowing. Tolerating uncertainty, this concept of being able to move through it and hold it, is actually counterintuitive, okay? So by thinking that I need to do something, I need to create certainty, I need to get rid of my anxiety, this sort of innate human response that we have to anxiety and uncertainty triggers us to want to go to action. And actually, as research shows, and what a lot of mental health professionals do as interventions, is actually quite the opposite. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is, even though I feel compelled to do something, we're actually going to focus on doing something that might be more of the opposite. So it feels as if we cannot tolerate certainty. However, we actually tolerate uncertainty every day. And so I think we'll want to kind of draw on the fact that there are things that we're not sure about that we do get through each day. And we can apply that to other examples in the future when we are having a more difficult time. So Jen, next slide, please. So I want to kind of come back to what we call unhelpful behaviors to manage our anxiety. I think a lot of us get caught in this trap, and I thought like it was helpful to just sort of put this out there that a lot of times we feel like we're managing our anxiety by avoiding. We're doing something to like avoid the feared situation, or ruminating or isolating. So we're engaging in an activity. Sometimes it could be, oversleeping, overeating. Sometimes it's substance use. But we're doing things to kind of avoid what it is that we're feeling in terms of the anxiety or uncertainty. And we kind of feel like, oh, that got me through it. Or sometimes it might be a distraction. So I'm doing things to avoid the fear situation. Could be cleaning, could be watching TV, lots of Netflix, lots of video games. I think is what we see in a lot of adolescents. Or it could be seeking reassurance. And some of you may have children that do this. Where they're kind of asking a lot of the same questions over and over again. Some kids can even be tricky and ask a similar question, but in a different way. And they'll keep doing that until they get the right response that they're looking for, or a statement that they may get in hopes of getting the reassurance. And so examples that I give here, I want to just sort of highlight as like, these could be maladaptive behaviors, although some could be pleasurable. They're really not healthy or not helpful because they are not actually helping reduce the anxiety. They're just masking it and buying us time until we're then more conscious. It's more at the forefront of our minds, and it just resurfaces again. And so when engaging in these kind of behaviors, we want to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of this behavior? If we can help ourselves and help our kids reframe how we're approaching an activity, we can still engage in some of these things. So instead of it being like avoidance by not engaging in something, how can we find a way to preserve a healthy act of, like David said, sleeping in on the weekend? I can still find time to have a regular schedule during the week, but then perhaps I can sleep in a little bit during the weekend. With distractions, can I have a healthy amount of watching TV? Did I earn having time for Netflix or video games because I did X, Y, and Z? Cleaning. Am I cleaning because this is an independent living skill? Am I learning to cook a new dish because I want to better myself? I want to build mastery. I also want to find other ways to develop independent living skills. So we're really kind of reframing it in the sense of, I'm not doing this to kind of shut away the anxiety. I'm doing this because it's a empowering activity. It is an empowering behavior. It is something that is going to help me grow as a person. And I'm not just using it to kind of hide from my anxiety. So like I said before, when we feed the anxiety, it can help it continue to grow. So we want to kind of help find ways for ourselves as adults and also for our children to be able to work through the anxiety and promote more growth that way. So the next slide, Jen. So one of the ways that we talk about managing anxiety and uncertainty is this concept of radical acceptance. And this is really identifying and accepting what is within my control and what's out of my control. And so a lot of times we sort of have to stop and think in a situation, what is within my control and what's out of my control. If we had to make a list, we would have 1 million things that are out of our control, and we would have 5 things that are probably within our control. And it's kind of a daunting list. However, it can also be really empowering to look at what that is, because it can then fuel me and give me some motivation and give me some direction in terms of what I can be doing. So acceptance is again, letting go, trying to change what is not within your control, acknowledging what is, not fighting reality, and deciding to tolerate the moment. And acceptance is not approving, it's not liking it, it's not thinking that it's fair. Acceptance does not mean that you're going to think that it's great. It's not necessarily saying that, well, if I accept something, that means I think that it should be so, which means that I'm agreeing with it. It doesn't. Acceptance just means that I acknowledge it for what it is. I'm not going to fight reality, and I'm going to tolerate what's here and what's in place. So we're going to be referring to this concept of radical acceptance as we move along here as well. Thanks, Jen. So when our anxiety happens, a lot of times it can kind of fall into two categories. It can be irrational or rational. When our anxiety is irrational, we can find ways to be able to kind of think through the situation a little bit more and try to help differentiate and change our thought patterns. Our thoughts can impact our emotions. So if I have the thought, I'm never going to have a good summer, that could impact my emotions. That could provoke more anxiety. It can make me feel depressed. It can make me feel hopeless. And that can then in turn define some of my behaviors. That may make me isolate, lash out, go to substances, different things like that. And then the cycle could just kind of keep perpetuating itself. And so a lot of times if we can kind of take a snapshot, what is the thought that I'm having about this anxiety or this worry? And if I can kind of figure out that it's irrational, a lot of times I can try to identify cognitive distortions. And so cognitive distortions can look like a lot of different things. Some examples are black and white thinking, or all or nothing thinking. A simple example could be, if you're driving in the car on your way to an appointment and you get a red light, a statement can be like, I only get red lights, right? And if I have that thought, that could perpetuate me feeling angry and that could lead to road rage. Yet, do I really get all red lights? That would not be really possible. So kind of find ways to kind of identify what are these distortions. Am I jumping to conclusions? Am I catastrophizing? Am I fortune telling? And a lot of times if we were to verbally express some of these worries that we're having, we might identify that we're actually having a cognitive distortions. So what do I do with that? We can thought challenge. We can really find a way to be able to put a challenge to that thought. And here's where parents can be really helpful with their kids. Parents practice this on yourself and then also kind of help your kid with that. If you hear your kid saying like, oh, I never get to do anything fun, this summer's gonna suck. So what evidence do I have to support the opposite? What would I tell my best friend if my best friend said that to me? Am I only thinking about the negative? And the answer to these questions is the thought challenge. So if I enter into my train of thought, this response, it likely will have a different impact on my emotions and on my behaviors. So this is just kind of a cognitive behavioral way that we can approach some of these anxieties when our anxiety is a little bit more irrational. Lemons to lemonade is a concept of finding the glimmer in difficult situations when our anxiety is more rational. And I think right now, more than ever, there's a lot of rational anxiety that's going on right now, or rational worry, because we're going through so much and there is so much that's unknown. A lot of times we get caught up in these statements that start with I should or what if. Pretty slippery slope and pretty dangerous when we get into that thought pattern, because again, it's imposing some sort of right or wrong, or we're kind of getting stuck in some fortune telling. But to kind of find the glimmer is to find a way to not make the situation from negative to positive completely, but to just find a little bit of a sliver of positivity in that. So example here, I should be more productive. A lot of people feeling that way. A way that we can reframe that, I'm being as productive as I can given the circumstances. See how we can kind of shift the thought there and shift the language to kind of soften it a little bit. It's a little less putting myself down and more about me saying like, I'm being as productive as I can given the circumstances that are really hard. I should be able to balance it. No one is superhuman. I'm balancing things I never thought I would need to. And so really trying to find a way to, again, reframe a little bit to be able to feel like we are able to have more of a positive mindset, or potentially even, find ways to decrease some of our anxieties and worries that we're experiencing. Thoughts about what if I get sick? What if I can't do the things that make me feel good? I can be creative to find a modified version of my pleasurable activities. And so that provides more hope, that provides more motivation, that provides more inspiration to be able to do things in a different way. So this is something that is good for us to practice, again, where we can kind of feel like we have some control over, our thoughts that can impact our feelings. When we have worries, a lot of times we have to stop and think about what we're thinking about and identify, is this a worry or is this a problem? Because if it's not a problem that I can't solve, then it's just a worry, and we would approach it differently. If in fact we are able to solve a problem, that's sort of like how we come back to this radical acceptance. What's within my control? What do I have the power to change, and what do I have to let go of? With this acronym RIBEYE, maybe appropriate for summer, unless you're vegetarian, but appropriate for summer, RIBEYE is this acronym to kind of help us work through a problem. So one, relax. What can I use to relax? Maybe it's, taking a hot shower. Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's listening to music, lighting a candle, different things that kind of help me relax. I have control over that. What is my problem? Okay. I have to identify what the problem is that I'm working through, because it's not a worry, it's a problem. Then I'm going to look at different solutions that I could have from my problem. I'll evaluate the outcomes and make a list of pros and cons for each of my potential outcomes. I'm going to choose one, and then I'm going to enact on it. And I'm going to list the behaviors that I can engage in that will help me be able to engage in the solution that I picked. So again, empowering us to be able to find things that we can change, have an ability to be able to engage in that and continue to work through that, and separate the worry from the problem. And as a parent, I really think it's important for us to be aware of our own anxiety. This impacts so much how you approach your child's anxiety. If you've ever been in a relationship before and someone else has been anxious and they kind of come to you and they're behaving in a very anxious way, if you notice how your anxiety can go up, it's very similar for our kids. And to be completely truthful, our kids pick up on more of our anxiety than we probably would like to admit. And so it's important for us to kind of be mindful of kind of where we're at and how we're managing things. So being mindful of our what ifs and should statements that we talked about earlier. I think for parents, it's okay to say, I don't know, or I am not sure. I think it's really helpful for kids, for us to put it back on them. We can say, well, what do you think about this? Or have you had this happen before? How did you handle it back then? And kind of helping them be able to find ways to problem solve and to build on previous experiences to let them know, hey, I did this before, I can do this again. And that's really empowering too, as a way to be able to decrease some of the anxiety. I think we also need to send the message that I can be anxious and okay. Feeling anxious or being uncertain about something doesn't mean that I am not okay. And so if we can kind of help continue to give that message, I think that we'd be on a really good path. We have a great opportunity to just model for our kids by practicing a lot of these things. I think it's important to validate, and Lizzie's going to continue here in a minute just about some of that. And I think we have to just normalize their experience and the fact that some things create anxiety, and it makes sense. I think we can create structure, as David was talking about, and a sense of certainty. We can create structure so that they know what they can look forward to, or they know that Tuesday nights we have game night. Perhaps there might be nights where there isn't game night, and that's okay. And they still can create structure, which can kind of help give a sense of certainty. Also, what is within my control? Big takeaway: behaviors, thoughts, skills you use, how you react, where you spend your time. Really looking at what's not in my control and what is within my control. This is a great opportunity for us to help our kids build resilience. We really want to get away from avoidance or dependence. Part of, as David was saying, part of the process of being an adolescent is the stage of development where we're individuating, we're drawing away from our family, preparing for launch. And if we can kind of help them get through these anxious moments and be able to have success in doing that, we're helping them build resilience for the future. So lastly, just to kind of sum up here, looking at anxiety as a whole, we want to look at it as a continuum. And it's not something that we just achieve. We don't achieve anxiety management. We don't achieve tolerating with uncertainty. We practice it. And it's one of these things that we have to kind of get in the groove of, and we have to keep being mindful of and keep going at it because practice makes routine and not perfect. So, I think as much as we, want to be able to continue to do, progress comes from tolerating or just sitting with it. In the short term, it's very hard. It's going to be hard to see kids be anxious. We want to go, we want to do, we want to fix, we want to take away problems. And how can we help empower them to be able to get through these experiences that they're going to be facing again and again and again in the future on their own? So acceptance and change, just to kind of drive that point home, identifying, what's within our control that we can change and what's not that we can accept. And that anxiety is counterintuitive. Really, truly, less is more. And we really want to kind of do the opposite of what our brain is telling us, but to really kind of look at, what are the things that we can do in the situation, and to be able to kind of help empower us and to be able to continue to move forward. So I understand that there's probably a lot more that comes with this, and, hopeful that as we continue to, step into days unknown, that we can continue practicing these things together as parents and then also with our kids. Lizzie?
Awesome. Cool. So I think for this next part, we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about parent-child communication and how do we talk about a lot of these strategies and ideas that David shared and Brian shared. And so I use this frame a little bit of good, bad, and ugly, recognizing that we're going to have good days at home, things are going to go really well. We're going to have bad days at home where things are not great, but we're hanging in there. And then there are going to be days that are just ugly. And so trying to think about sort of what are some different strategies and tools we can use for those times. So we'll start out here with the good. The spoiler alert, validate, validate, validate is the beginning of all of these slides, because validation for young people is so important. Validation, right, says I see you, it says I hear what you're saying, I'm present with you and your experience. And especially right now when there are so many experiences that are new or challenging, or there's a lot of should I or am I doing it right, this is a really good way to show your kids, right, that you're there with them. So sometimes it's great. Wow, that's awesome. How exciting. Also, right, when things are going well, that's a great opportunity for positive reinforcement. Thanks for taking out the trash. Like, I noticed that you put the dishes in the dishwasher. Like, thanks for doing that. I noticed that you got up and like had breakfast, like at the time that we talked about. That's awesome, whatever they are. And I think circling back to David's point earlier, generating positive experiences, right? Whatever those new rituals and routines are, whether it's family game night, dinner together, new baking skills, all of those things, but generating those positive experiences together helps build that resiliency that will help you weather some of those not so great experiences. And then the last piece of this, right, is that when things are going well, this is the opportunity to plan for the future challenges are coming. So on the day when people are well rested, everyone is having a good day so far. People are enjoying each other's company. This is the moment, right, to talk about what are some of our boundaries, to be clear about communicating them, and things like that. So Jen, you want to go to the next slide? This is kind of a way to talk about what I would call a communication plan. Here are some questions. I made a little worksheet. I am not going to tell you that your high school student is going to be jazzed about completing a worksheet. They will probably roll their eyes at you. And that's okay, right? There's a reason why, in housing programs and when your kids might go off to college, they're going to complete a roommate agreement. And there's a reason why people do that. It's because it's really helpful. And a lot of those questions, right, that you might want to think through are, how do I let somebody know when I need interruption-free time? We have more people in houses, right, who might be needing to use similar spaces. How do I like to be interrupted when I'm by myself, right? We think about the routine of school, right? Kids get passing periods, they get transition time in our new land. If you're playing video games for a couple of hours and then it's like dinner time and you didn't get any sort of transition time, that might be jarring. How do I take a break from a conversation when I need to step back? But then also the positives, right? Like, what makes summer feel like summer? If it makes it feel like summer to have ice cream, then make sure that you have ice cream, right? Like, what is the thing that sort of helps people feel like summer wasn't canceled totally? That's when it's all going great. Sometimes it's not. And so that, Jen, if you want to go to the next slide, that's okay, right? This is really hard. Just as was shared, right? There's a lot going on in the world. Maintaining physical distancing from other people for a long time is really hard. It's not only hard for young people, it's also hard for their parents. And so it's okay that it's it's okay to struggle. Our clinical director and her family talks about what they call the Corona cranks, which I really love. Is just a way to talk about, like, sometimes it's just like a bummer, and sitting with that idea that it's okay to struggle. And so I want to share a couple of sort of ways to look at that. Again, the first is just validating that, right? Even naming something like the Corona cranks is just a way to validate that sometimes this isn't great. So statements like, it makes sense that you feel angry about that. That's so disappointing. I get why you're frustrated. This isn't what you planned. We can validate our kids' emotions, right, without validating their behavior. So just because we're saying, I get why you're frustrated, this isn't what you planned, doesn't mean it's okay that you, like, I don't know, like, walked out of the room and slammed the door or whatever. We always like to remind people of another acronym, we love acronyms, of HALTs, right? So hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and stressed. When people are these 5 things, they are the least likely to be able to hang in a difficult conversation. So wanting to check in with ourselves, right? When we are feeling short or frustrated with our kids, right? Or when they are feeling short or frustrated with us. Have people eaten? Did people get a good night's sleep? What else is going on, right? And recognizing that most people are feeling some version of lonely, angry, and stressed kind of all the time right now. And so we might not be operating at peak efficiency. Similar to what Brian was talking about, right? As parents, you can own your experience, right? I can tell that I'm feeling really edgy today. I'm going to take a break. That's a really great opportunity to model for young people what it sounds like to be struggling, and then taking care of ourselves. We can also try to give power to our kids when we can, right? So sometimes we share our negative feelings because we're looking for advice or we're looking for help. Sometimes we're just sharing our negative feelings because we just want someone to know that it's unfair, right? Or that it doesn't feel good. And so sometimes it's helpful to just ask, right? Do you want my help problem solving this, or is it more helpful if I just listen? And remembering to do that, right, for our kids so that they get some agency around what's next. And then observing and wonder aloud. I love the tool of wondering aloud with young people because it helps them build some self-awareness, right, and helps them build that resiliency that Brian was talking about. I'm noticing that you're really tense. I wonder if you're feeling stressed. You know, when you see your kid, when you notice that your kid is slamming the cabinet doors, like, I'm noticing that the doors are loud right now. I'm wondering if something's going on, right? They don't have to answer. It's not a direct question. You're just observing for them what's going on. Sometimes, oh, right. So to make this a little interactive, we have a couple of polls of some ways to think about different things. So I want to share this scenario with you. So thinking about your teen, right? So your teen didn't sign up for summer school this summer, but most of their friends did. You can tell that they're getting bored at home and frustrated when their friends can't talk. They're snapping at their siblings and at you, and things at home are getting increasingly tense. How do you approach your child to discuss this? So Jen's going to put up a poll so you can see some different answers, and would love to see which answer feels most true to you. Give people a second to share their responses. Hoping it popped up for other people. Okay, awesome. So it looks like, right, lots of people thinking about different responses, and I gave multiple choice, right? Not because there's a right answer, but because there are lots of right answers, right? And so just looking at some different strategies that somebody might use, right? So this summer is really different than what we planned. I wonder if that's making things more tense at home, right? So you're engaging them in identifying the problem, right? Do they think there's a problem, or is it just you who's feeling like there's a problem? It seems like you've been more irritated with us than usual. What's going on, right? So I'm observing that you're irritated. I'm noticing that that's happening, and I'm wondering what's going on for you, right? Rather than making an assumption. And then our most popular choice, right? I'm worried about how we're all going to get through the summer together. I know I've been feeling more stressed than usual since our options feel so much more limited. Do you have any ideas how I think it says make it through, So yeah, right, this is a great example of owning your own experience, right? Or thinking about, like, I know I'm feeling stressed. How are you feeling? Does this feel true? Like, and again, engaging in that collaborative problem solving. Thanks, Jen. So looking again, sort of moving forward to what I would call the ugly, right? So this is in the moment, right? When you're like, there is active fighting going on, whether that is, you know, silent treatment or angry, right? Whatever, like, or yelling, whatever anger looks like in your home, right? Or when people are really stressed or really frustrated. Again, a reminder that we can always start with validation. I can tell you're really angry. It's clear this is important to you. Sometimes, right, we get angry or we get loud because we feel like we're not being heard. And so recognizing that we can always offer that validation as a place to start. Reminding ourselves of HALTs, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired, stressed. Checking in with yourself. Where are you on that sort of HALT spectrum? Where do you think that your young person is? When people are angry, right, taking breaks when you need them can be really helpful, right? That sort of break to cool down. It's also important, right, to let your kid take breaks too. So if they are feeling really frustrated, making sure that it's okay for them to step away from the conversation, but it's helpful to have a plan on how to return to that, right? So this could be something you talk about in your communication plan, about how you're going to handle breaks when people are like in conflict. So maybe we're both really frustrated. Let's plan to talk about this again at X time, right? So, you know, it's 10 a.m. Let's plan to talk about this at 2, or let's plan to talk about this over lunch. I need to cool off. I'm going to blankety blank, 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 whatever that is for you. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to, you know, sit outside on the back deck for a minute, or whatever is true for you. And again, modeling that for young people, right? What does it look like to take a break? What does it look like to state your needs clearly, to say, I need to cool off. Here's how I'm going to handle myself, right? Because what that gives young people the opportunity to do is to say, yeah, I need a break too. I'm going to do this other thing. A friendly reminder, right, to fight fair. So stay in the here and now, and save conversations about patterns of behavior for a set time. So, you know, this kind of goes with that second bullet of avoiding absolutes. So we don't say you always, you never. Nobody likes to hear that when they're frustrated or when they're really angry. Is not a great time to be like, you've been snapping at us all day, right? Is not a helpful thing. That's a great conversation to have when things are going well. And also, right, a reminder to avoid name calling and comparisons. I think we all know that these are helpful, right? But avoiding saying, well, your brother is able to wake up on time, why aren't you? Is not the most helpful, right? Because it's focusing on how someone is falling short in comparison to somebody else. Saying all of that, sometimes we say things like that we know we shouldn't say, right? And it's okay that that happens. Just say you're sorry when you need to. And just a reminder that even as adults, we mess up too. So I was really hard on you earlier. I'm sorry. I know you're doing the best you can. You know, like I shouldn't have compared you to your brother. That wasn't fair. I know your situation is different. Let's talk about what that's going to look like. And just making sure that you remember as a part of that, right, to let it go. You don't need to berate yourself. You don't need to, you know, sort of sit in it all summer long. This is going to be a long summer. And I think that's my next slide, but oh no, it's not. This is going to be a long summer, right? And so making sure that you're giving yourself some grace, right? Giving yourself the space to make mistakes and to move on, and giving your young person the mistakes to move on. So we have one more scenario for folks. So you and your team argued about letting them play a soccer game with friends against your family's social distancing rules. They yelled at you, told you were the worst parent ever, and you haven't seen them since they slammed their bedroom door 2 hours ago. You're frustrated that they can't just follow the rules, but you also know how hard this summer is for them. How can you repair and move forward, right? So how do you start that conversation? So Jen will pull up our poll. Give folks a few minutes to pick what they feel like might be the most useful or most likely for them. Again, no wrong answers here, just a sense of what feels true for you. Cool. Oh, so interesting. This is awesome. So, right. So again, all good answers. So the first one up here, knocking on their, so you will notice they all start with knocking on their door. Always a good reminder, right, that as much as we as parents want to set boundaries, and it's our job to set boundaries, part of adolescence is adolescents learning to set boundaries too, right? And so respecting their private space, or respecting that they might want to have boundaries too. So knocking on a door is a good way to give people the heads up, like, hey, I'm wanting to enter your space now. Which again is just a way to give agency to young people in a time when they may not feel like they have a lot of it. So knock on the door, right? Hey, I know you were really angry earlier. Can we talk about it, right? So again, offering permission is this, can we talk about this? Like, I know you were really upset. I want to talk about it. I want to engage with you in the conversation. So our most popular answer, I know you were super angry with me earlier. It totally stinks to not be able to hang out with your friends like you normally do, right? So super, super strong validation statement there, right? Like, this is sad, right? Because what that, again, like a validation statement, even if it's not a question, opens the opportunity for the young person to, for your kid to respond back to you, right? To say, yeah, it really does. I was really mad because I really wanted to play soccer, right? And the last response here, right? Hey, I know we plan to watch a movie tonight. Do you still want to join me? I'll make popcorn while you pick it out, right? This is not talking about the issue. This doesn't mean that you never talk about the issue, right? But it does mean that maybe you can talk about the issue at a later time, right? Maybe right now, what would be the most compassionate thing is just to like have a positive experience. And then making sure that you circle back to it. So maybe the next morning over breakfast, be like, wow, yesterday was really intense. Like, how are you feeling about it now? And so I share this example, right, not because, and Jen, you can feel free to go to the next slide. I share this example not because there's a good, bad, or right, wrong way to have social distancing rules, but just as a way, right, to think about how everybody's rules are going to be a little bit different. Everybody's experience is going to be a little bit different. And that's really hard too, right? And so I want to just remind parents in this space, right, to give yourself some grace while we're doing this kind of intense communication about boundaries. And having those really hard conversations with young folks. And so with that, I will pass it over to Christina.
Thank you, Lizzie. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I am excited to talk to you a little bit about how do we keep our teens healthy. We've learned all these ways to communicate with them, to support them, to set healthy limits with them, to really have a healthy and positive summer as a family. And I'm going to talk a little bit about specific things that we can do for our teens and what that can look like. So our goal really for the summer is to keep our kids healthy mentally, physically, and emotionally, to just really protect and preserve their overall well-being. And we can do this in lots of different ways. But something that's really standing out right now in a lot of the conversations that we're having is it's really important for kids, even during the summer months, to feel productive. It's helpful for them to really create that sense of purpose, to find meaning in activities, to feel motivated by activities. And by creating those experiences and those opportunities, we're really protecting kids' self-esteem and really helping them build that sense of accomplishment that we want to hold on to even during the summer months. Well, we're going to move on and talk a little bit more about specific ways of how we can do that. So I really like this checklist. I think this is a great kind of concept of things that you can do every day, things that teens can do every day, younger kids can do it every day, and even as adults, I think these are really important things for us to be mindful of as we go through the day to really think about what's most important for us. This is a really nice one. You can print it out and put it on your refrigerator or your mirror and glance at it throughout the day. Just as a good reminder of like, how can we really make the most of today, especially given the circumstances where we are missing out on a lot of things. We're missing those social connections. We're missing opportunities, things that we were really looking forward to. How do we create that really positive experience this summer for ourselves and our families? And the way it kind of breaks down is these 7 components. First is do one thing that you'll be glad you did later. And this can look lots of different ways. It can be really small things that kids can do, like clean your room, put away your laundry. And it can be bigger things like making a commitment to, maybe you have a sophomore or junior student at home and every week they look up 3 colleges that they might be interested in. And they put aside a little time to do some research online, to visit websites, to do virtual tours, to really start to learn about the potential places that they may want to attend down the road. And that's really great research and great experience to help them on their college journey moving forward. The second part is to do one thing to help someone else. I really love this idea, again, especially for teens, to the service for others. And again, it can be little acts of kindness at home. You help unload the dishwasher, you help make a meal. Maybe you have an elderly neighbor who you mow her lawn for her. Just little things to really help someone else and to put someone else before ourselves. Another component is to do one thing just because it brings you joy. And again, adolescents are in the moment. There's still that sense of, wanting to meet their own needs, and let them do that. Let them play their favorite video game for a while. Let them listen to their favorite music. Binge watch a little bit of their favorite show. Maybe they love to write. Maybe they love to paint. Something that they really do just for the joy and the happiness that it brings them. Try to get kids to do one thing every day to get their heart rate up. This is so important, again, for our overall health and wellness. Exercise activity is key right now, and the summer is no exception. I think it actually, in the summer months, gives us more opportunities to have the flexibility to really do things that are active. Have kids go walking, running, biking, shooting baskets in your front yard, doing exercise videos, practicing yoga, anything to just get them active and moving and engaging the body as well as the mind. The importance of laughter. There's so much research on laughter and how much it really helps our overall health as well. So take the opportunities to laugh together, watch a funny YouTube video together, listen to a podcast together that's funny, watch a sitcom together, things that just allow you to laugh and celebrate that moment, and let those endorphins be released through that laughter and joy. And the last part I really want to spend a minute talking about is to take the time to acknowledge 2 to 3 things that you're grateful for every day. Gratitude is so important, and now more than ever. Super important for adolescents as well, again, as for us as adults. So much research has been done on gratitude and the value of it. The physical benefits of gratitude: it increases your energy, it improves your sleep patterns, it often allows people to exercise more rigorously. The mental health benefits of gratitude are documented in numerous studies, that it really increases our level of happiness, our level of optimism, our level of pride in ourselves, and our level of hope, which I think right now is so vital to all of our young people, to really instill that level of hope during this really stressful time. So I included this quote that I think is just really beautiful and really great to reflect on why gratitude is so important. So gratitude turns what we have into enough and more. It turns denial into acceptance, chaos into order, confusion into clarity. It makes sense of our past, brings peace to our today, and creates a vision for tomorrow. I think that's really powerful for our kids to hear, that if we practice gratitude, it will bring us all of these things. I think right now there's a lot of chaos and confusion as to what our world is experiencing, what's going to happen next, what opportunities are going to be available to them moving forward, and what other opportunities they might feel they're going to miss out on. So really helping them find that inner peace and to really believe that in a better tomorrow and what can happen next. Some great ways to practice gratitude for young people are things such as a gratitude journal, where they can write down a couple of things that they're grateful for every day. The idea of writing thank you notes. I know it's a little bit of a thought of the past, but there's some real beauty in actually taking pen to paper and writing a thank you note to a friend, to a teacher, to a coach, to anyone who's really made an impact in your life, who you're really grateful of the time you spent with them and what you learned and gained from them. For some kids, it's just a matter of taking a few minutes of quiet time to practice gratitude. That self-reflection, maybe it's first thing in the morning, maybe it's right before you go to bed. Just the opportunity to really sit back and reflect on all the things that you're thankful for can be really healthy for our overall well-being right now. Next slide, please. Self-care for our kids. David did a wonderful job of talking about self-care for us as adults and parents, what we need to do to really be our best selves. We need to practice self-care and take care of ourselves in lots of ways. And the same is true for our teens. I think it's really important that we sometimes help them during these times, recognize what self-care looks like, and give them some ideas and strategies of how to care for themselves. And for each student, you know, it might look a little different. Some kids are more active, so they are going to really benefit much more from activities that are outdoors and involving movement and really engaging the body. For other students, it might be more reflective, kids who like to read and to write, who like to create. You know, there's not a right or wrong to self-care for adolescents, but it is important that they practice it. So this bingo idea is a really nice way, again, to give kids ideas, really concrete strategies of ways to take care of themselves over the summer, and they can be creative with it. They might say, I'm going to do 5 off of this list every week, or my goal will be to do everything on this board between now and the end of summer. But it just gives some nice ideas of ways to really care for themselves in healthy, productive ways. Again, to keep themselves engaged, to keep them feeling like they have some sense of purpose, and to keep them, you know, really in the moment and being mindful and engaged. Next slide, please. Okay, so lots of parents have reached out to us really looking for some concrete options for the summer, and we really worked as a district to be creative and coming up with some different ideas for kids with different interests, different backgrounds, different resources, and just lots of different needs. I want to preface, though, when you look at this list, it is meant to be a guide, and it's meant to just be an idea generator for families. There's no right or wrong. I feel like we're in a place in time where, as parents, this can be extremely stressful because you're hearing what everyone else's children are doing this summer. And I just want to recognize that and really let every parent out there know that whatever you can do as a family is enough. There's not a good or bad, there's not a right or wrong. Your child doesn't need to do X, Y, and Z to have a healthy, active summer. Each family, it's going to look different. You want to do what's right for you as a parent, what's right for your child or your children, and really what makes sense for you as a family together. So, you know, some days it might be very productive and people are doing lots of different creative things and are really engaged and really purposeful throughout the day. And other days, it might be those days where you're watching TV and you're laying out in the backyard and you're just taking time and hanging out as a family, and just being together is enough. So, you know, be gentle with yourselves and know that anything that you're able to do right now is going to be good for your family. And you can really create it together. So lots of different ideas out here. Things like obviously enjoying the outdoors, walking, biking, hiking, exploring forest preserves, just really taking advantage of the nicer weather in the summer months and the beauty of the areas around us that we can easily access. Helping your child maybe get involved in community service projects. There's, again, a lot out there talking about the importance of kids feeling that sense of purpose and feeling productive, and service projects are a great way to do that. There's been lots of stories on the news of kids doing things for elderly neighbors, kids collecting food for food pantries, you know, maybe collecting towels and newspapers and bringing them over to a local shelter. Just different ways that the kids can feel like they are giving back, they're being productive, they're, you know, using their time wisely, and really feeling like they're making a difference. Of course, summer school is always a great option. There's lots of wonderful programs being offered through the district. There are programs being offered through our community colleges, and lots of other universities are doing things online that kids can sign up for. So those are always a great option as well to keep kids actively engaged and, you know, still thinking and learning and processing throughout the summer. Virtual classes are really big this summer, I think. People wanting to expose themselves to new forms of music, art, language classes, picking up a new instrument, lots of possibilities to do lots of online learning. Related to that, picking up a hobby or interest. Again, you could do it online. You might be self-teaching yourself a new musical instrument. You might be ordering books that are going to help you learn a new language or a new hobby. So lots of ways to really, again, keep kids being creative and exploring new things that can really take their focus and they can learn and build from. Truly, the silver lining in all this is the family time, in my opinion. I think the opportunity to really connect together. We've talked a lot about movie nights, game nights, cooking meals together, doing projects together. All of these are great ways to spend your summer. I've been amazed at some of the stories I've heard from kids who are building kit cars in their garages or making guitars with their older brother. Really amazing creative experiences that if we weren't all together as much as we are right now, probably wouldn't be happening for lots of families. So really take advantage of that time to really enjoy each other's company, find common interests, and really share them together. Allow your kid to take time out for themselves, to really learn about themselves, to journal, to meditate, to reflect. I think there's a lot of new self-awareness that's coming out of young people through this situation. They're learning about themselves, they're learning about their values, learning about what's really important to them. And that's extremely valuable. So encourage that. Again, maybe you buy them a new journal, or, you talk about it together and say, hey, I've been thinking all these things and it's really made me recognize what's most important to me. What are you feeling is most important to you through this whole experience? Using it as an opportunity to connect. Of course, reading anything that your child is interested in, books, comic strips, mangas, fan fiction online, magazines. There are so many things out there, again, to just engage their brain, engage them cognitively, get them thinking, get them really using their whole selves in the summer, keeping everything working to its full potential and allowing them to continue to learn and grow. We talked about obviously going out in nature, virtual tours, museums, things that are just interest again to your child as an individual or to you as a family. Great opportunities. Of course, summer jobs. I know lots of kids were excited to work this summer, and there are still some possibilities. So you might want to help them do some searching online. But also, again, maybe doing some community service work is another way to be fulfilled if you feel like you can't necessarily go back to your original plan of summer employment, or there might be some summer jobs that become available in the neighborhood. Again, maybe babysitting a neighbor or even younger siblings or cousins, helping families in need in those type of ways where you can still feel like you're being productive and engaging with the larger community. And of course, relax and have fun together. Enjoy this opportunity the summer brings. Allow kids to unwind a little bit, unplug a little bit, take some time to rest and refresh, and just really enjoy the journey as a family. And then my last slide. Thank you. Again, is just some nice resources just for fun. Again, there are live links in here, so once we're able to present our whole presentation tonight on the website through the district, you'll be able to access these slides, and you can utilize any of the links to fun activities for families. Again, activities you can do, classes you can do online, some great community resources if your child is interested in service projects, local agencies that are offering opportunities for young people to help in and to provide services to the community. The park districts, I know we've been talking a lot about summer is different, but it's not canceled. So the park districts have done a really nice job in both Glenview and Northbrook to provide options for children, teens, and adults. They're doing lots of things online, of course, things like yoga, exercise classes, trivia nights, but they're also constantly updating what is being open within the community. So recently tennis courts have begun to open up, the walking trails have opened up, and over the next month or so we might see some additional things open up as well that you can access and will again keep your child active and engaged and just really productive throughout the summer months. And the last part is virtual field trips. So again, we know lots of families aren't comfortable traveling at this point, and that is certainly understandable, and there's a loss of vacations and things like that that people were really looking forward to. But don't be afraid to look for the opportunities to do some of that online. There are lots of zoos, museums, historical sites, cultural sites that are up and have these really beautiful virtual tours that they're providing. So it could be a really nice thing to do as a family as well, to explore some of the places that you'd love to visit as a family one day, or that you were hoping to visit this summer that now might need to be postponed, but to still have that a little bit of that experience together. So I think our overall message is to really try to enjoy the summer with your child and your children. Take advantage of all of the resources that are out there. Be creative. Do what's right for your family. And, focus on the positives of what this time brings us. Focus on gratitude. Focus on enjoying one another and really celebrating the time we have together. Laura, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Christina. Such great ideas. I appreciate it. So hopefully one takeaway from tonight's presentation, and with all the uncertainty that's happening right now, hopefully we're realizing how important it is to stay connected. Staying connected to loved ones, to friends, to the school, and to the community resources. We encourage you to share your ideas, things that your family have done during the stay-at-home order, and share with the hashtag Glenbrook Together Apart. We will share these ideas through our Glenbrook social media with hopes that other families can learn and discover new ideas for their summer. Next slide, Jen. Thank you. First, we want to thank our panelists for sharing their expertise and their knowledge with our Glenbrook community tonight. Next, I want to thank the parents, students, and community members that joined our webinar tonight. We hope that you found this information useful and helpful throughout the summer months. Please do not hesitate to reach out to the school if we can be of support. I'm now going to turn it over to Rachel Zinberg from CATCH, who's going to help facilitate the question portion of our presentation.
Okay, thanks so much, Laura. Okay, we got so many great questions. So we have a lot of good stuff to discuss. Lots of juicy stuff going on in everybody's lives. The first thing I want to say is there were lots of questions about, will the presentation be available? Yes, the presentation will be available, and all links to all of the resources mentioned, the worksheet that Lizzie did, and all the resources from Christina, all those will be available in the follow-up. You'll get a summary, and then all that, so that information will be available for you. Well, I'm just gonna jump in here with a hard question. What do I do with a teen who is basically shut down, is not interested in conversing, is not want to talk about a plan, communication, doesn't want to talk, and doesn't want to go out of the house and go see friends? What do we do with that? Who wants to take that question?
Sure, I'll start. I think one of the things that we can mention here too is sort of like, when do we need to ask for help? I know that a lot of times during times like these, a lot of people could just have different responses to what's going on. I think that what can be sort of expected is this sense of, difficulty adjusting. I think transitions are hard. I think lack of structure and routine is very hard. Not having the norm, not having places to be, not having as many responsibilities can be very hard. And I think we can kind of anticipate that there's going to be an array of emotions that are probably expressed and behaviors that are probably displayed. And I think that, we need to be kind of conscious of when is enough enough and when is too much. And so to kind of get a sense of, if I've been kind of pulling out a lot of the stops to help my child engage, to get them involved in things, to get them to eat meals, get them to try to get out of the house, get them to shower and take care of their, kind of everyday living responsibilities. If they're lashing out pretty frequently, if they're isolating in their rooms pretty much all day, every day, and that's going on for a significant period of time, it'd be worth reaching out and asking for support and reaching for help. A lot of great resources in the community that are going to be listed on both the 225 sites as well as on the presentation here to kind of find a way to start an intervention of some kind and to get maybe some other supports and other resources in place. And it might be, if you're kind of finding that it's been kind of weeks and weeks and kind of pushing the months barrier, it might be time to kind of reach out and say, hey, something's gotta change here, because we're heading into, 3 months of summer of similar behavior. So it might be time to kind of say, might need to try to find some more resources and get some more help. So that's one thing I could say, and I can go on about this for a long time. I think other things too, sometimes we have to look at it in different perspectives as well. We can definitely look at it from a mental health perspective and say, gosh, are they really depressed? Is there something maybe bigger going on? We can also look at it from a behavioral perspective. If my kid's in bed and they're kind of refusing to come out of their room, we got to stop bringing food to the room. They got to come out to eat their meals. You're not a bad parent for making your kid come to the table to eat dinner. You know, certainly if they want to use their phone, if they want to have internet privileges, if they want to have Netflix, if they want to play video games, it's a pretty normal expectation to say, you got to be out of your room. You got to be able to shower and brush your teeth every day. You have to be able to help out around the house with a chore or two, and be part of the family community in order to be able to get, you know, the luxuries of life. And so sometimes that can be kind of helpful to get kids out of bed, and or, you know, take away that pillow, take away that blanket, open up the windows, open up the blinds, play some loud music. Those are things that we recommend to parents during the school year, when we have to kind of help kids get out of bed or kind of make that first initial step. Certainly we kind of hope, and we talk about, get the body moving and the mind will follow. And if we can kind of help that process of kind of getting them moving, might that not be helpful to be able to get some more motivation and build some energy?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so there's many versions of this question came in next, so I'm just gonna kind of pick one. It seems like many parents are getting increasingly judgmental about how others are making decisions regarding COVID and reintegrating into the community. This gets extra complicated when our kids' friends and their families are making different decisions than we are. Any advice for navigating these tricky situations? I don't necessarily know my child's parents anymore, so that seems to make it even harder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's tough. I feel like I can sort of speak to that a little bit. I think the first place I kind of want to go to, right, is that, like, it is normal that our adolescents are struggling with the concept of social distancing. When we think about young people and, like, health behaviors, just like general health behaviors, right? Like, think about, like, kids and smoking, for example. It's very hard for young people to hold the sort of, like, future thinking that is required to say, like, don't smoke cigarettes because someday you might get lung cancer, right? Or don't smoke cigarettes because your secondhand smoke might cause somebody else to get lung cancer. It's very abstract, right? And I think when we think about physical distancing as a strategy for slowing the spread of a virus that young people seem to be less likely to be personally impacted by, it's very hard for them to have that sort of, like, forward thinking, right? So it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you as a parent because your kid doesn't get social distancing, right? And it doesn't mean that your kid is, like, uncaring about other people. And also, it's hard for a lot of people to manage those spaces. And so I think just to start from that place of just, like, recognizing people are going to approach this unprecedented, to use the term that's overused, right? Unprecedented event in lots of different ways. And there isn't necessarily a good, bad, or right, wrong. There is, however, right, sort of your family's values and your family's choices. And so the best thing you can sort of come back to, right, is what is the boundary, right? Circling back to David's piece around, like, clarity, right? What is the boundary, what is the expectation in our home? Why is that the expectation, right? So helping young people understand why you've made the choices that you've made, right? Is this about protecting a family member? Is this about your broader, like, your family's values around public health? Is it whatever it is, right? And in your own words, right? In the words that make sense to you and your family, right? So why is the boundary what the boundary is? What are the consequences if people don't follow the boundary? And then validating how uncomfortable and unpleasant that is, right? How unpleasant that is for your young person, right? And thinking about that it's not great, it's not ideal, it's not what you wanted, and that it sucks. And they might have some anger, right, that's directed towards you for being the person who's enforcing the boundary. And I think on the other hand, right, to validate you as a parent, it's hard when your boundaries feel more strict than what your kid is either reporting that other families are doing, right, or what you're seeing other families doing. And that's hard too. And I think that's a piece of really using that self-care piece. And I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to that as well, but I think just thinking about from the communication perspective internally, I think those are some thoughts I would have.
Yeah, and I think I would piggyback on what you were saying, Lizzie, you know, with sort of like speaking to this community, you know, this is no different than if we were talking about the school dance and everyone gets to do the co-ed sleepover, why can't I? Or curfew, everyone gets to stay out past curfew, why can't I? I really just want to empower you as parents. This is an individual, family by family, case by case decision. And really there is I'm no medical professional. No one here is an epidemiologist that can tell you what to do about the proper use of COVID and how we release people back into the wild. But I think it's going to be case by case. And I think that each family has the right to make their own decisions based on what they think is best for their family and their kids, and to be able to stand by that. And I think, like, what are the other alternatives? I know you want to go over and see them and be hanging out in a large group. What else can we do? I can validate the fact that you want to see your friends, and we're not there yet, to do this in a safe space. So how can we do something different? What are some other options that we can kind of come up with together?
I think that's really good, both you guys. I think there's nothing quite like parenting to feel like we're being worse than everybody else. And so sticking to your values, as Lizzie said, is really a key, and having those conversations with your kid about what's real, what's honest, and validate how difficult it is. It's hard.
Thank you. Here's the next question. Given the complexity of everything else that is going on in our society, in our country right now, activism, protest, anti-racism, advocacy, how do I support my teens' desire to participate in those activities and keep them safe? How do I balance my fear with their passion?
I'll just start, I guess, with a little bit of response. I think that's a really, really complex question, and probably a question that all parents have. And so I think on one hand, it's really great to see and exciting when our kids say, that they feel strongly and passionate and they want to stand up for the rights of others. And I think that's really, positive, and that probably makes us proud as parents. And given the current circumstances with COVID, how do we balance, the safety? And I think that's tied to the other question about going out and trying to maintain social distancing. So I think it goes back to having that conversation as a family, and what are your values and what do you believe as a family unit, and recognizing the importance of having that discussion, and how can we as a family or as individuals, how can we let others know what we support and what we believe in, but still doing it safely. So I don't think there's an easy answer to that, but I think my suggestion would be to start with having that conversation within your family as parents, and with all the kids or individuals within the family unit, and try to come up with some general ideas, starting with values and what your beliefs are, and how do we maintain safety if we were to share our thoughts and views with others appropriately. If anyone else has any other thoughts or ideas on that topic.
I think the other thing I would add is that it is an opportunity to talk to your child about, that's a value that you espouse. What else can you do potentially other than something that you feel is unsafe? What else can you do to honor those values and to be active and be engaged in that response?
That's great. The next question is, I know when my daughter has been in the throes of an anxiety or panic episode, it has been so important to just sit with her. I don't talk, just present as a way of validation. Can you speak to the importance of just being there in tough moments with your child and the benefits? Thank you.
We could do a whole presentation on just this question, to be honest with you. So how I want to respond to this question. So I think, obviously, as a parent, our first innate response is to show love through protection and fixing things. We want to take away their pain in any way, shape, or possible. And I see here that just by sitting with your child, with your daughter, has been sort of a comfort for her. One of the things that we would want her to be able to learn is, how can I tolerate my anxiety or panic independently? I think what can happen sometimes is a parent, a friend, a phone, a stuffed animal, something can kind of be a safety behavior and kind of a crutch in some of these situations. And so I think what would be helpful here is to kind of find ways to empower her to find different things that she can use to tolerate the panic that doesn't necessarily require mom being there. There's going to be times when she's at school, at a sleepover, at a job, somewhere else, a field trip, and we want her to feel empowered to know that I can do things to tolerate the anxiety and tolerate the panic without having to go home to be with my mom. I think that when we experience things like anxiety and panic, and then we associate this sort of safety behavior of being with mom, that's the only thing that's going to help me then through my anxiety and through my panic. And so we want to kind of help separate that, not to decrease the value of mom in the relationship that you have with her, but to be able to empower her to know that she can be able to manage these things independently and on her own. And that's involved in a process of doing that. And if you find that it's been very tricky to do that, lots of great professionals that really focus on this with anxiety and panic that can be really helpful in coaching you in ways that you can begin to kind of help her find skills that she can use to tolerate that anxiety and that panic, and to help her really feel like she can decrease a lot of that in her life.
That's great. Thank you, Brian. Anybody else have something to add? Okay, we've just a couple minutes left, so we're just going to ask one more question, and it's a good one. How important do you think open, true communication and discussion about the COVID pandemic and the unrest in our nation is to reducing our kids' anxiety and feelings of helplessness versus increasing those anxieties and feelings of helplessness?
Again, we could do another whole topic conversation on this. One thing that I didn't mention that I would have gone back and talked about is, with anxiety and uncertainty, us talking about things, us watching the news, us, seeing videos and yes, having a lot of information does not change the fact that we are still uncertain. And it doesn't change the fact that it doesn't give us more anxiety. And so on one hand, knowledge is power, yes. And on the other hand, I think by, us continuing to engage in a lot of the videos and news and in the feeds and, oh my gosh, did you see this? And did you see that? I think sometimes can almost be too much. And I'm not necessarily saying that people should stop watching the news. Please don't mishear me. I think that, having conversations just about, how do you feel about that? What are your thoughts about that? Let them talk. I think it's maybe less about us talking to them or at them and more about letting them just sort of process what their experience is like and finding healthy avenues and outlets to be able to kind of process their experience, validating. There's really no response that I think would be, unrelatable here, but just to kind of give them the space to be able to kind of talk about what that is and what they can do with that, and then kind of talking about what are the things that are within our control. We can kind of sit and worry about all the things that could potentially happen in our lives and in the world, especially given right now, and that's not really going to change much of anything. It's probably going to make us feel even worse. So kind of thinking about after we validate, like Lizzie talked about, how can we find ways to look at, so what is within our control and what can we do?
Lizzie, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to add to that too, that I think it's really important to remember that even though our kids might be growing, right, and growing into adolescents who have more autonomy, you as a parent are still one of their most important relationships. And so certainly, I think absolutely agreeing with Brian in the sense that we don't want to overload ourselves, right, with the social media scroll and the sort of mind-numbing overwhelm that can cause by that. But I think also, right, shifting our kids' attention away from that and saying what questions do you have about what's happening? What information can we find together, right, and sort of engaging as a partner in that sort of information seeking is also teaching them the life skill, right, around how to find good information, right? How to know when to set a boundary. Even I can say in our own house around COVID, we've been all right, no news about COVID after 9 p.m. or whatever, right? Just as a very tangible way to set a boundary around how and when we talk about something that can be so overwhelming. You're also modeling that it's okay to to have times where we do engage in that conversation, and then there are times when we step back. But I think that I can't overstate the importance of your role as a parent in being a source for open and true communication, which was a part of that question. It's really hard to know what's real and what's not. And I think as an adult, that's a real gift that we can support our young people with as they're navigating such uncertainty, I think, as Brian said, as well.
And we recognize that there's like lots of questions that people probably still have. And I think we all alluded to the fact that there are probably more questions than answers right now. Certainly feel free to reach out to Lizzie, to myself, any of the staff on hand here if you have other questions that you'd like to chat through. More than happy to take the time and do so with you all. So please feel free to do so.
Thank you, Brian. Just want to say thank you so much to all of our presenters. It was really such great information. And as I mentioned, we have a resource document that has all the links to all sorts of different creative things to try to do with your time and with your kids, and as well as references to all the things that were mentioned and the presentation, so that you'll get that in the next couple days. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.